Councillors, we'll call this regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually, is being recorded, and will be published on the publicly accessible website. Council CAO additions. I have two additions, healthcare and Greyhound. Are there any council additions? Very well. Any CAO additions?
No, Mayor.
Very well. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes to regional council meeting of November 9th, 2020, and the special regional council meeting of November 9th, 2020. Motion to adopt those minutes, please.
I'd just like to enter a correction of the spelling of Lawrence Forsberg's name in the regular minutes.
Thank you. Can I get a motion, please, to adopt the minutes? Moved by Councillor Souls. Seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Public comment period. No comments from the public? Reports. Administration report number 85, procedures bylaw review. Ms. McIver?
So this is a follow-up to the last report on November 9th in regards to the procedure bylaw. So there was a couple outstanding items based on the discussion. One was the recording of minutes. And then there were a couple follow-up pieces to electronic meetings after council's resolutions that evening. So there was a fair amount of discussion around the recording of minutes, and currently our bylaw reads that minutes be fully recorded. So we interpret that to mean a full record, which is discussion-based minutes. The thought was that given we are recording and publishing or soon to be streaming council meetings, your written minutes essentially become a transcript of a most true and authentic form of the minute, which is the video recording. So some of the questions that were raised at that meeting were how common this is in other jurisdictions, what do other communities do? I think there was some concerns raised that there's potentially a loss in not keeping discussion-based minutes. So we did a fairly thorough survey of other communities. Communities of all sizes. In all of those communities, we found one that actually keeps discussion-based minutes. The rest keep decision-based minutes with context added to the minutes where the information doesn't exist on the agenda itself. So some examples of that are council or mayor additions obviously aren't recorded on the agenda, so they only come to light at the meeting itself, as well as council reports towards the end of the meeting. Obviously, those aren't listed when the agenda is published, and they become part of the record at the meeting as well. So there was some additional research that was done comparing the different types of minutes. And the Local Government Management Association actually recommends that minutes be kept in a decision-based way, because discussion-based leads to subjectivity. And when you have a person authoring a set of minutes, you always risk the influence of bias of the author. And there's always the concern that potentially the intent of the council member speaking isn't captured adequately, or something's interpreted incorrectly. So thankfully, we don't often find that around this table, but it's always a possibility. And then also, decision-based minutes allow council's decisions to be the focus of the minutes versus independent opinions when they're recorded as such within the minutes. The other interesting thing we found when we were reviewing how other communities take their minutes is we were looking at their procedure bylaws, and their procedure bylaws simply say that minutes be legibly recorded. So they don't actually dictate how or in what form a set of minutes is recorded, just that they be recorded. And then they let each community has a procedure basically in terms of how, or a standard in terms of how minutes are recorded. And then that applies to any type of meeting, whether it's a special meeting, a regular meeting, a committee meeting, a public hearing. any of those types. So those are just some of the considerations we wanted to bring back to council for discussion.
Councilors, any comments on this? Councilor Roper.
How much staff time are we potentially going to save from switching to decision-based minutes?
So I asked Hillary to keep track of her time. So she wrote, obviously, the November 9th meeting minutes are discussion-based minutes. It took her 4 hours to write them, and it took me another hour and a half to review them, so 5.5 hours. I've attached a sample of decision-based minutes, and they took me an hour and a half to write them. So it's basically 5 times. It takes us almost 5 times the amount to write discussion-based minutes and edit them. Obviously referring back and forth to the recording, which would be done either way, because the way that we took some of council's feedback in the decision-based minutes, and that you wanted time stamping and things like that to reflect where in the recording those discussions occurred. So whichever route is taken, we'll have to refer to the recording to ensure that it's reflected properly. But the time saved, you can't dispute. There's a ton of time saved. So,
Any other discussions? Councilor Roper.
With the posting of the meetings on YouTube, do we have a backup of those files? Do we have a mirror site where we're putting it on a separate one in case one is compromised? How do we ensure that going forward, you know, these meetings, the recordings will be accessible in the future?
So we did a fair amount of testing with the handy little stream to YouTube feature. So in our test, YouTube does archive a copy of the stream, but it's not available right away. It took about 24 hours before we could actually access the previous day's test recording. And with anything streamed, there is a natural lag in what's occurring in real time versus what's available in the streamed YouTube session. We also found that, so you can download the video afterwards, but it's just as easy using Zoom to record at the same time as you Zoom. And so through Zoom, you can decide if you save that recorded copy to a computer, which we do. So we have a local copy, we have a server copy, and then we actually upload the YouTube copy. So we've built ourselves a few safety nets. I'm not paranoid at all. And then also, the only one glitch that we found with Zoom's streaming is that if there's no way to pause and resume a stream. It forces you to end the stream on Zoom. So Zoom creates that connection with YouTube to allow you to flow the content through, but the stream doesn't actually end until you log into YouTube to end it. So when we tested it, because being mindful of council's practices where you temporarily adjourn, go into an in-camera, and then resume a recall to order, and then finally adjourn. Sometimes that span of time in the in-camera is an hour, or sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes it's an hour. So what happens on the YouTube side is I'm sitting at home watching the stream, and then I get a black screen with the circle of gray that looks like just a buffer, or you don't really know what's happening. And that carries on until someone logs in to end the stream. And then on our side, we restart the stream when we resume the regular meeting. It starts a whole new session. So it's very disjointed from the viewer side. So my only suggestion to that is that we potentially, in a regular, if you're calling in camera, end the stream on both sides, Zoom and YouTube. And then the next morning we could replace with the recorded version so that the viewer would see the streamed version up until the temporary adjourn, but then the next day be able to see the whole entire meeting from beginning to end. So if there's a recall to order and a rise and report, that would be part of the video record, where you would lose that if it was only the streamed version online.
Councilor Roper.
Is it possible, instead of say pausing the stream, could we mute our video and audio and place some sort of place card or a title card that says why there's nothing happening, and that the council meeting will resume. And then once we're done in camera, we can come out and then press a few buttons and then it comes back on, instead of interrupting the stream itself, allowing it to continue just with a title card or something and then come out. And I absolutely agree with, just having the stream available and then uploading the recording and not really having both. I don't think that's necessary. Having a nice video to upload afterwards is good, and then losing the stream, because that's just for live, right? So, but yeah, so that idea with the title card, is that possible?
So we played with that. So what it would require is either we so if we have virtual attendees, we'd have to use a different platform potentially to honor that connection with the virtual attendee, or run a couple parallel applications. So when we originally were trialing streaming, we were running more than one application at once, so that we weren't actually streaming from Zoom, we were streaming from this other application. And I do believe you can add in your custom details like you suggested in that, but just with the seamlessness of this and frankly, the capacity. So if we were running parallel applications and having that level of tech needed, I would feel more comfortable having someone at the meeting to just look after that, because that could get a little, I wouldn't want to mess that up, as well as assisting council in the meeting business. So,
Councillor Penny.
And just on that point, I'd be leery of, we have had little glitches from time to time, so I wouldn't want to in-camera meeting that has a picture up there to all of a sudden become us in here in a discussion in an in-camera meeting. But that's not what I meant, what I was going to speak about now. When you mentioned about the backup, it's great that it backs up to YouTube and it backs up, it's on physically on a computer and then to the server. But is our server backed up online? Everything on the server, right? No matter what it is? Okay.
so our Nortech, our tech support company, they also keep a backup.
Sure.
So they can, I think they can restore to 2 weeks prior or something like that.
Yeah, I can't recall the length of this, we do a daily backup. And that's why we've had the odd issue that we've lost some data during the day, but we haven't lost a significant amount of data. That said, we're also in the process of transitioning our dependency on our current server because some upgrades are required. And so we're actually and spacing and things, because so at the end of the day, we're actually reducing our dependency on our server within the organization. We're transitioning to more web-based, so we're transitioning to Box actually.
Awesome. Okay.
So the other thing that we haven't dealt with, and we're still kind of looking at this, is that the video recording of our meetings is the true record of the meeting. And right now we're not dealing necessarily with our recorded copies as in the same retention practice as we would say a hard copy of minutes. So it's quite the shift in thinking around records management. And so we're getting our bearings on that, because in some ways the common procedures and policies haven't caught up to that. But that's something that we really want to consider, is that we need to, yes, ensure that they're stored adequately, and also that retention policies are applied in such a way that they can't be edited. They're permanently retained. They're never, they can't be overwritten. They can't be moved or destroyed or whatever. So. Yeah.
Are there any comments? Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Andrews.
I just wanted to say, I'm looking over the sample that really encapsulated what we had talked about. I think minutes going that way, I think would be fine on my part.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Roper.
Yeah, and just to further on Councillor Andrews' comments, I had some trepidations until I read this report and saw the sample minutes. So that really definitely helped me put it into perspective. I really like the time codes next to the resolutions. I think that's just really great as far as transparency goes. Anyone from anywhere can log in and see the true conversations that took place, and there's no question at all. So yeah, I'm now comfortable saving staff some resources and definitely pursuing decision-based minutes.
Counselor Growing.
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. I think it was brilliant to include the sample. It really cleared my concerns up. And as long as there's either a link to where the conversation has happened or a time stamp, whatever, I think, yeah, I'm willing to move forward on it for sure.
Any further comments? Okay, I think this is a great leap forward in both saving the municipality resources and also providing transparency for the public, where they can view our council meetings at any time, yeah, whether it's as they're happening or at a later date. So I think this is an excellent example of transparency, and it's a win-win for both the public and for the municipality. So I'll ask for a motion.
Make that motion that we go to decision-based minutes.
Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Gerwin. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Ms. McIver?
That's great, thank you. And so just so long as council is in agreement with the practice of streaming from Zoom, and where appropriate, replacing a recorded version with the streamed version if the streamed version has missed a significant, any significant decisions after, then we'd be comfortable doing that on your behalf.
Very well.
Excuse me?
Councillor Penny?
So, and ever evolving, I guess we could always be keeping an eye out on new platforms, right? Because maybe 6 months from now, we might have something even better. And the way things are evolving for this kind of online thing, I'm sure it's going to go fast.
So in light of that, when we come back with a draft bylaw, because that's the next step, we'll ensure that the bylaw is flexible enough that it could accommodate a change in software so that you're not married to a certain tool, I guess, is just something to keep in mind.
One more thing.
Councillor Roper, go ahead.
There definitely are more advanced systems in place. This is basically free, right? I mean, other than the Zoom that we're paying for anyway, YouTube is free. So there's definitely other platforms that would more than likely be more robust, but incur more costs. So yeah, it's good to keep our eye on that as well.
Very well. Moving on, correspondence from letter from Mark Sieben, Deputy Solicitor General for British Columbia, and a letter from Fort Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce regarding support for local business. So kudos to our administrative staff for shepherding some of the work, a lot of the work, from the municipality to local contractors. Information package, received for information, council information package for November 11th, council information package for November 18th. New business items. Northeast BC Resource Coalition request. The Resource Municipalities Coalition had asked that each of the municipalities provide the 3 highest priorities for healthcare, so that they could find some common ground between the municipalities of the Resource Municipalities Coalition and bring them forward to the Minister of Health and probably NCLGA as well, to reflect what the most pressing needs were in our communities for healthcare. So I said I would bring this forward to the meeting today and ask if council could come up with the 3 highest priorities as far as healthcare goes. And I will ask Councillor Gerwin perhaps if she would like to speak to this.
Well, I think the number one priority that we hear and we talk about all the time is equitable access to healthcare services. I mean, I think that encapsulates it all, right? Like we can get into the details around maternity, around cancer, around all of those specifics, but you know, looking at that higher level, like we are asking for equitable access to healthcare services, and that whether it's transportation or any of them, like I would hate to pick, you know, maternity over cancer care. If you have a family member that's suffering from cancer, that, you know, it's hard to pick a one priority over another. But I think we can all agree that equitable access to healthcare services should just be the principle that the province is operating from, and it's not.
I'd like to apologize that this comes so late, but it was a late addition from Resource Municipalities Coalition, so I'm sort of springing in on this quickly. I did have a chance to give this some thought, and I agree that equitable access to healthcare should be in our response to the Resource Municipalities Coalition as the overarching theme of healthcare for our municipality. I think what they are looking for is to find deficiencies that all of our communities share. When I was thinking about this, I thought of transportation is one of the important issues in our community. And I thought staffing of nurses was another important issue in our community. And I think this is what they were looking for, is to see if they can find common themes like that that they can bring forward. But once again, I agree with you that, you know, the overarching idea of equitable access to healthcare needs to be that overarching idea of what we're asking for, what we are seeking in the Northern Rockies.
Yeah, I mean, the nursing shortage is a current situation that's Northern Health said itself it's facing right throughout its service area. There's no denying that that isn't affecting here, but how do we pick the nursing shortage over or the inability to have even the most basic of ultrasound in this community since September? And with nothing in sight until maybe December, but maybe January, like we don't know. So there's so many issues facing the residents of Northern Rockies that I don't know how we would pick the top three. Because it would, yes, transportation, but yes, maternity, and yes, lack of cancer care locally. Those are the three of the priorities that are encapsulated in our community health plan. So I think, you know, recruitment and retention is another one. You know, when we surveyed our community, they came up with a huge list of gaps.
I think what the Resource Municipalities Coalition is looking for is to narrow this down to a few common issues throughout their membership. And that's, you know, I can go back to them and say, we don't have three priorities. What we have is equitable access to healthcare. And I can give them that if that's the desire of council. The other option is to select what we think is the most pressing issues of the hundreds of issues that we have regarding healthcare. Councillor Penny.
I really think you're gonna have a hard time finding similarities between us and most of the communities that are involved in the Peers Coalition, because we just we don't even compare in the slightest. As Councillor Gerwig said, the most basic ultrasound, like, I mean, that would just be a normal thing to happen in Fort St. John or Dusty or Chetwood or wherever, or within 45 minutes of their home, they could go and get it. Whereas, you know, it's unavailable to us without risking everything to travel on the highway in the winter. So I'm with Councillor Gerwig. I would have a hard time. You'd basically have to put all the problems in a hat and shake it up and pick three out, because it's pretty tough call to figure out which one is the most important. It depends on whether you're bleeding or what's wrong with you. It would be what the top priority would be at the moment, because we really tough. Like I said, I don't think anybody compares with how much we're lacking here.
Are there any other comments on this? Very well, then I will just go back to the Resource Municipalities Coalition and tell them that our priorities 1, 2, and 3 are equitable access to healthcare. Very well. The second thing I had was Resource Municipalities Coalition once again had been contacted, they said, by Ministry of Transportation, and in discussions with administration, it may have been a contract through Ministry of Transportation regarding Greyhound bus service. The Greyhound bus service was canceled 2 years ago. Ministry of Transportation has reached out to them, and I think to our municipality as well, to ask about improvements to the bus service, Bus North. So they are looking for, and I don't have the 3 issues that they were bringing forward. One of them was the scheduling of the buses in the north, and I thought maybe we could get administration to look into the busing and some of the issues around busing and forward them to the Resource Municipalities Coalition. Councillor Girling.
Was the municipality, and did we respond? So we responded already back?
Very well. Can we send a copy of that then to the Resource Municipalities Coalition? Let them know what we've responded.
So we need to confirm first, which I haven't had an opportunity since Mr. Wally sent his email this afternoon, was the core, because his email was a little vague in terms of who we talked to. We talked to a consultant on behalf of Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and it was more broad-based around transportation in general. So BC Bus was one of the conversations, but there was also rail, air, medical travel. Everything was encompassed the community. We spent about an hour or more on a call with them. So I'm not sure if the contact that the coalition had to Mr. Wally was the same specific conversation, because his email was specific to just the BC Bus. So I just need to connect with Mr. Wally just to make sure that we're talking the same thing.
Okay, can we put that on the agenda then for 2 weeks from now?
For a
Just a follow up from Mr.
Oh, yeah,
Wally.
so yeah, we can follow up. Yeah.
Very well.
That said, Mayor, so is there anything specific that council would like to communicate back to the coalition around specifically the VC bus? Is there anything scheduling is one, I guess, like is in terms of the once a week, and but anything pressing, I guess?
I think I would need more information on
Yep.
usage schedules. Like, I'm not feeling that informed to be able to make, yeah.
Yeah, so we can provide some information for council. At the same time, I'll reach out to Mr. Wally here tomorrow, just to confirm that, to see if there was the same discussion or different in terms of what we had, and then we'll provide some information, feedback for council.
Thank you.
We could just ask them to provide us with a bus schedule, and you ask for 6 days a week for an incoming bus and 6 days a week for an outgoing bus. There you go. That's pretty simple.
If you go to the BC Bus website, it'll outline what the schedule is in terms of the days of the week that they come to the community, the cost of the service, when they depart, and then the connecting bus service, which doesn't really get you that far, to be honest with you.
There was a resident inquiry last fall about it, because one of the concerns was that the BC Bus schedule doesn't connect with Alberta bound buses. There are 2 or 3 Alberta bound buses that come through Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, but the scheduling doesn't line up. And then there's also scheduling challenges if you were to, say, take BC Bus South for a medical appointment and want to come home on the Northern Health Connections bus, or vice versa. So the RDP team took a look at all of those schedules, and we're just trying to highlight that there's no connect. So that might be something, if council wants to bring back, just some of those things that could be highlighted in more general terms, probably.
Very well. Mr. Berry, 2021 budget discussions.
Thanks, Mayor. So we're in the process right now of preparing our the 2021 municipal budget. Typically, this is when I ask council if there's any specific or any guidance they want to provide regarding the budget for the following year. That said, still going to throw it out to for council in terms of any specific guidance you may or may not want to give. Currently, we're working on, obviously we have a challenge with certain service levels. The most impacted at this point is the rec facility. We're still navigating through that. And of course, we could be throwing a change or a curveball at any given time based on the province and what they want to do. And obviously some services that were being provided at the facility have been reduced as of the orders last week, just because of the, high intensity group exercises and things like that, for example. The craft fair, I believe, that's been canceled as of course, can't have that. So there's some moving parts, but that said, is there any, in terms of service levels, given the fact that we do know going to next year, given what we know today, there's going to be to provide similar service levels, we're going to have an increased cost. So, if you look at the facility today at the rec center, costs are about where they were from an operational perspective previously. However, we're providing less of a service. Required taxation, however, is increased because revenues have gone down. As an example, so we're probably approaching into 2020 about just about close to $500,000 of lost revenues organizationally, not just at the rec, but within that. And I'm going to provide a little bit of information to council at the next meeting just to give you a bit of a snapshot of what that looks like. But that said, there's also an increase in costs continue to go up each year, and we've communicated each year that when you start looking at inflation, fuels, lose, material supplies, contract services, and of course the CBA with wages, they all impact where we are. So just looking at council, if there's any big items or big things, any guidance or direction you see, do you mean different next year, or are you looking at still around, I'll call it the status quo, as much as we can say status quo, and see what that looks like from a cost perspective.
Councillor Andrews.
And Scott, you mentioned doing some sort of overview. That's what my question was about, is if we could have an overview on like where our budget's sitting in comparison with kind of our service levels and the days that we were actually in operation over this year and where we're sitting, so we can kind of have an idea how much over or under we are, so we kind of know what to look at for next year.
Okay, so what I can tell you from a year to date, we can provide that information. The challenge is it gets data because we actually consolidate everything until mid-January when they have the closure of previous year. But that said, in terms of over-unders, we're not in bad shape. When you specifically look at, so typically we're gonna come in under budget for the organization. Where we're going to see an impact compared to previous years is the revenues which offset those expenses. We're looking at somewhere in that neighborhood of just over between $400,000 and $500,000, which includes the rec revenues, the impact. So we'll provide the impacts of council's decisions around the landing fees at the airport, the lease relief, et cetera, et cetera. So we're pulling the information together. So I'll provide you a bit of a snapshot. Generally, if you look at just COVID related expenses, and I'll get into more detail at the next meeting specific on this table that we have, COVID related expenses versus revenues, we're essentially going to break even at the end of the year based on the reduction of expenses. If you look at wages for the rec center, et cetera, but then additional costs to operate the rest of the facilities, and then of course getting the rec facility fired back up, and then the absence of a bunch of revenue. So long story short, if you look at the reduction of expenses, they're offset by the increased expenses and the lack of revenues. So we're sitting that will probably, just from a COVID perspective, be flush at the end of the year that way. But in terms of the overall municipal budget, we're still in reasonable shape. The decisions that were made at the beginning or during the 2020 budget preparation process to kind of stay the course, given we didn't know what we were going to end up, was a good decision based on, from a financial perspective, because we're not going to be sitting here at the end of the year based on what we know today, posting deficits and having to dig into either a reserve or a surplus, which a lot of many municipalities are in that situation today, where they're posting, just our neighbors to the south of us, pushing $3 million deficits. That is making some real big impacts into their service levels and the way they do business. So from a financial perspective, fortunately, we're not in the same position as other municipalities, because we built a relatively good budget to help weather the storm, for lack of better words. And then of course, when we had to make some decisions around some increased, say, the front counter stuff, we were able to also pull for some of our reserve funds that we put away for not necessarily days like this. We never expected this. When we talked about rainy days, and Councilor Green, you made the comment before, that's raining now. Well, it's pouring now, right? We're in the middle of a lengthy storm that doesn't go away, the eye of the hurricane, for lack of better words. That said, we also have the funding from the province that's come through. So that transfer came through here last week of the $1.5 million. There's some requirements, of course, in terms of reporting for that. We can't just arbitrarily throw it on our, we can't artificially lower the taxation requirements and things like that, but we have the ability to use it to bridge some gaps to help make up some of those revenue shortfalls, some increased expenses potentially. $1.5 million sounds like a lot, but you can chew through that very quickly, and we want to be able to weather the long haul. So before we make any decisions on where we're applying it to, we want to look at some sound financial decisions based on where we're sitting overall for the year. For a year to date, as Councilor Andrews is talking, where is that number? What does that look like? So that we only use what we need to use from what makes financial sense to make sure that we have some good financial stability. And then going into next year, have the ability to pull from, to help us offset some of those revenue shortfalls. Because council, the landing fee, for example, council made a decision, we don't revisit that till next August. We might look at it and make an assumption in the document that for the year, we're not going to get any landing fees. Council can and plan for the worst, hope for the best, and look at, instead of requiring taxation to make up the difference of that revenue shortfall, is to pull from that funding we received for the province, for example. So we're working through all that in the background. And of course, the rec center is an anomaly. I mean, we know that council would love to get it up to 7-day operations. We're just not quite sure how to do that yet. It'd be difficult right now to hire and we're hiring obviously for the pool and some additional help to get some of the things open, i.e. the play space has been a real challenge for us, but we're working on it. But that said, if you were to look at what we know today is to try to run the operation 7 days a week, we would chew through a significant amount of funds fairly quickly, just from a person power perspective. So we're factoring all that in, but given what we know today, just wanted to throw up to council as we're working on this. Never want to assume that you don't want to change course or do anything different, but just wanted to throw out the seats and not that you have to think about it. We'll broach the subject again at the next meeting, but as we're prepping the budgets right now, we're prepping it more from a status quo, and I'll use the word very loosely, because public works, for example, is service level perspective hasn't been impacted the same as rec or airport, for example. Right?
Councilor Roper.
Yeah, I had a question about this building, the municipal facilities here. I know that we're using grants to do renewal at the rec center, the ACE plant, the fire hall. We're looking at the foundation, and that project could provide a lot of economic activity for the town. What about this building? I know there's a lot of chatter, about the draftiness. Well, I mean, that would be helped by replacing the windows, and of course, the fire suppression system is very out of date. And so I'm just wondering.
Suppression system?
Sorry, right? Yeah.
We know the
And so I know the tenants of this building would probably feel better if this portion of the building had a good fire suppression system. I'm just wondering if there's any plans to renew this portion of the building at all, and if so, what kind of grants could we be looking at to accomplish that?
So, to answer your first question, we are not sure what the direction we're taking this facility, because we still have to provide information to council yet, and we've done that full overview here, which we still, and I'll be honest, I haven't reviewed in detail from that group because COVID happened. What the intent was that third-party review of all those major, we call the big 8 buildings. This is one of them. Well, I'll say town hall, but also town complex is one of them. From what I gather, the executive summary putting money into this building starts to become very challenging, because it's where the building is from a age perspective. I mean, if you were to look at trying to put an adequate fire suppression system in this building, huge dollars, unless you were just to have pipes come on the outside, because it's a huge overhaul. And then what you're doing is you're starting to meet new code, which then the building, there's some significant challenges. That said, we've purposely and been communicate to council in the past, we've purposely just kept this building operational and minimal required upgrades before we put any significant money into it, our finances into it. We want to be able to do, we don't want to do that until we have a fulsome discussion with council in terms of what the bigger picture looks like, just so they are aware and can make an informed decision. So that's one of the reasons. And the intent was to have that provided to council earlier. And I mean, we always throw out that COVID card, the pandemic card, but the reality is that we just haven't had the opportunity at this point to do that. And it's on the books to do that shortly, to provide that information to council. It will be the same information as the Public Works Fire Hall, right? What we're looking at right now is what's the cost to fulsome cost to do the required work to get that up to a certain standard. What would the cost be to purchase or rent or lease another facility instead of that one, either for temporary measure, because we don't know if we need to vacate the building or not, or a full-time measure. And then if you were to do that, say if it's a full-time component, what's the cost to deal with the building, the structure, even if you're not in it, because you can't just walk away from it. You'd have to most likely demolish it, right? So, and then it becomes a financial decision to council. This building would be the same thing. As to what level would you want to reinvest in this building, given the fact that in some cases it might not necessarily make sense. So
Councillor Souls.
Sorry, just one more thing. But that said, we do have with the funding, with the reserve fund, we've continuously put funds away to deal with either the upgrades of this building and to what level, which is part of that report, or B, another decision. So the good news is that we have been putting funds away into that building reserve fund and doing what's required to keep the building operational with the HVAC, et cetera. But no, we haven't spent significant funds, as you can see, by the around the building, windows, drafty windows, et cetera, to deal with some of the other energy efficient issues and things like that potentially. So it's in the works.
Councillor Souls.
Yeah, I think the issue of grants and buildings and so on, there's two ways of looking at the grants. One of them is the actually looking for grants and help to upgrade and so on. The other is finding other buildings that are upgraded that are already new, that are sitting there at half their value because of the low economy. And so there's options to look at that other side of it. The reason I just mentioned that to bridge off of that is that I think that it's important when we're looking forward to the new budget. You got to forgive me for being an optimist, but I like being an optimist. Actually, is good for me. And I feel that I think that the coming industries that are coming, the turnaround that we will eventually walk into is actually begun. And I think that it's let's not lose sight of our IDCA agreement in its reason for existing. Because we've had to go and we've had to kind of throttle back, and this is the first year that we throttled back, and we really have a much smaller agreement with the province for this year. Let's not get used to that. Let's immediately, as we are able to look forward to a renewed economy, really kickstart that IDCA right back to where it was, right back to the 10 million. Those 50-cent dollars have been very, very good for this community, and the more of them, the better. And so when I say that, that is in the back of my thinking when I'm thinking about a new municipal hall or whatever form that takes. So anyway, it's just a perspective I want not to lose.
And we do, I mean, a significant amount of the IDCA funding, and fortunately, because we built that robust asset management program. And if you look at the initial, I've communicated before, the initial IDCA agreement or the IDCA agreement, you use it or lose it. But that said, we have the ability to look forward years, and this is where we've come with this fairly aggressive reserve program that we have, and a policy in place that's endorsed by council to be able to support. If we're not using it this year, we have and that's what we've done. We've continued. I mean, that's what a lot of that building, the facilities, it's been around the town complex and the big 8, we call it. The challenge we have, and I didn't answer your second part of your question you had, Councilor Roper, is when it comes to funding and grants, town halls are typically the white elephant of the room, and they don't necessarily they don't bode well in funding applications. It's usually linked to, we trust me, we've stabbed and looked at certain ideas and even creative to get the to look at the one for we did a last minute Hail Mary. I mentioned the council for the fire hall public workshop to try to link in services and water and sewer. But from a typical administrative office perspective, building perspective, it's not, they're not very many. They go towards infrastructure grants and services grants and stuff, and we can argue different things, but it's just the criteria is not there, but we always look for it.
Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Roper.
Would renewal to this building be able to qualify for IDCA funding?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, that's, I mean, the significant reserve fund we have for building renewal right now is linked specifically, like I think the 1 year we put probably well over $1 million into just the fund for town hall. We have it now under the building facilities fund. It's under one fund, but the IDCA component, that's where it's all been linked to that supportive mechanism for IDCA. We've used cognizant, this is some case someone from the province is watching our meeting here, but then at the end of the day, we've used the filled facilities fund is when we look after satisfying our various reserves requirements for infrastructure. We've used the facilities fund as a bit of a catch-all to put that in, because we know at the end of the day, from our documentation we provided to support that with the province, we don't have enough through the IDCA agreement to say replace everything we need to do, because you always have to look at shortfalls. So we've used this fund, the reserve or the buildings fund, as a catch-all for if we have $8 million worth of work and we've got a $5 million grant and our $5 million contribution, for example, then $2 million ends up going into the building facilities fund as a whole.
Thank you.
Just one more thing.
Councillor Roper, go
Just
ahead.
one more thing to consider, Councillor Souls, you made a good point about, the future and other infrastructure that's in town that could be utilized. I just want to say that I really feel this building has a lot of cultural significance to the community. And whether town hall stays here or moves on to a more advanced facility, I think this facility would have a second life. I don't see a possibility where we're demolishing this and having a hole in the ground between the library. I can see a fire happening here and getting rid of our seniors and our library and our theater. And I can see that happening sooner than later. So that's my concern, is that, not to be extravagant with the renewal, but make sure it's safe and make sure that, if there's a problem, that we're not going to be liable for a situation that we ignored for so long and then it became too late to deal with. So that's all I have to say.
Mr. Berry, we do have adequate fire insurance on this building, do we not?
Adequate insurance.
Never built a theater for the insurance
On this building?
All our facilities
Yes.
are insured based on, so we brought this back to council. I'm going to say that this council, shortly after you came in, our premiums actually went up because we were actually overall underinsured. And that's, can we remember the rec center back in 07?
Mhm.
So the replacement value of the facilities within the organization are valued at replacement value, not actual value of the facility itself. So
Very
that's-
good.
And that was a process that was undertaken, I'm going to say less than 2 years ago, that was done by the insurance companies, and the value of our assets increased significantly. Like our water plant, for example, was probably 1996 values versus what it would be if the water plant were to be, catastrophic failure today, what the cost would be to build a new water plant. And this, I think when I communicated with council back in the day, I used this facility as an example that this facility in the books is not worth a whole lot, but to rebuild this facility, obviously significant because of the costs. I mean, even, and I appreciate the comments. I mean, the challenges we have with this facility is no one really can do a whole lot with it, because the minute you start moving, when you go past a certain percentage threshold of work inside a building, then you start having to look at the new code. And then that's why unfortunately buildings do get destroyed, because it's cheaper to destroy and rebuild. I never say I want to do that, because of this building, that's the challenge we have with it, is if you were to walk away with it, what do you do? It's not a facility that, you'd almost have to give it away, to be honest with you, for anyone to have any worthwhile to do anything with it. It's a significant cost to upgrade the facility. Right? There's so many deficiencies within this building when it comes to accessibility, mobility issues. The fire suppression is huge. There's a huge price tag attached to the fire suppression component being when I talk sprinklers, right? You wouldn't build a building like this today without sprinklers. We're basically, I'll call it red circle, like we can operate with it, we're not required. So from a liability perspective, we have what's required to meet the required liabilities. But if when you look at putting a sprinkler system into this facility, huge costs associated with it. And we do have those numbers. It was looked at a number of years ago from a fire safety perspective.
Councillor Gerling.
You mentioned a bit earlier about the building renewal report that's coming back to council soon. Do you have more of a timeline than soon, or?
I wish I did. No, I don't have a. I'll be honest, and I'll be honest. I'm in the organization. I'm the holdup right now. The group that was involved, which was Harv as a recreation facilities, Luann, a couple others in the group, they were part of it. The company that did the work for us is prepared to provide a presentation to us as staff, and then a presentation to council that was going to be in person. That could change. So I've had this conversation just last week around circle a date in the calendar. Let's sit through it and walk through it. Let's figure that out, and then we'll go and present something to council. Right.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Barry? Very well. Any comments from the public? I believe we had some participants. We had 2 participants. Wow, this is a red letter day.
2 non-staff participants.
2 non-staff participants. Well, I want to thank them for participating today. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I must have missed that. Go ahead. Council reports.
Does anybody want to go? No. Okay, so I attended the chamber board meeting November the 12th, and as you may or may not have noticed, they're going ahead with the Moonlight Madness. Obviously looking a bit different this year, over a 3-week time period as opposed to one night. So the chamber area meeting took place virtually. Usually the chamber staff go down to Fort St. John, but it took place virtually this year, November 18th. And for those of you that don't know, the virtual roundtable for the chamber is taking place November the 26th at 11 a.m. And the guest is people from Peak. So if you're a member and interested in attending, you can register. And if you're not a member, you can still register. Not sure if there's a cost for that or not if you're a non-member. I also attended the library board meeting, and I'm very happy to say that they have gone back to an opening on Sunday. So first time since it was shut down. So I'm very pleased to see that. And they're continuing with some of their virtual programming. Today I attended the BC Rural Health meeting, and there was a discussion around the community paramedic program. So I was able to present our the successes of that program here. There was people from around the province had heard about it, hadn't experienced it. So I was able to share what our experience was. And then just kudos to everybody involved in getting the aquatic center open and running for Sunday swims. There was a couple of weeks ago, there was one-time option, and last weekend there was 2. And I was there, and there was lots and lots and lots of families there. So yeah, kudos to everybody involved in that. Thanks.
Any other council reports? Very well. No comments from the public. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn then. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.